Corn School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Headline Amp Fungicide and Pride Seeds.
Bernard Tobin back on the Corn School, joined today by Ben Rosser, OMAFRA's corn lead. Ben, how's it going?
Bernard, I'm well. How are you?
I'm pretty good. We're hanging in there. As I say, we're great to see you in the field this time of year, but we're not going to get there. But great to hook up with you. Want to talk a little bit about strip till today, something that you've been working on. You and I sort of hooked up last summer to look at some of your research plots that you did last year, and you got some results to share, and specifically on fertility. Maybe before we get into the results, Ben, talk about, I guess, how your research trials set up last year, and what you're trying to learn.
Yeah, so since I started as corn specialist, I've talked about some other strip till fertility stuff, but there's a couple common questions that growers had, about efficiencies of fertilizer when you strip till versus fall versus springtime. And, needs for starter fertilizer if you've already put fertilizer down the strip. So, I wanted to have a product to have some answers to some of those questions that I found were fairly common questions from growers about strip till fertility.
Hey, so let's talk about some of the results from last year. And I know you're going to do some more work on these in the future. But first year results, talk about, I guess, the difference between, broadcasting and incorporating P and K across a full field, yield-wise, and how that compares to, actually just concentrating right into the strip.
Yeah, so it was a common question from growers. If I go to strip till, is it more efficient because now I'm banding fertilizer in that zone where I'm going to plant the corn crop or mixing it in versus a broadcast scenario where you're spreading fertilizer across the whole field? Is there a yield bump for putting that fertilizer closer to the seed? So of course we are on soils that are fairly responsive, so lower testing soils. And when we did compare, a spring broadcast application of 60 pounds of P and 60 pounds of K, compared to putting that same amount of fertilizer in the strip with a strip tiller, we did see on average about a 10 bushel per acre yield response for the strip till fertilizer compared to the broadcast fertilizer.
Yeah. Hey, I know you're focusing on P and K. What about the difference between, spring versus fall? Some guys can have the type of ground that you can do spring or fall. Some people have to do, don't have that option. What have you learned about the difference, spring and fall yield?
Yeah, so same thing. We did a comparison of strips with P and K in the strip in the fall, and then a spring strip with P and K in the strip. And again, when we averaged yields, so in the fall strips, we would have just stale seed bedded those, so nothing else more done in those strips. On average, we saw it was about a 7.5 bushel per acre yield response for spring strip and P and K over just the fall strip with the P and K. So it's, we can't exactly say whether that was just fall versus spring fertility, because again, it was fall versus spring tillage too. So maybe a tillage had a component in there as well. But comparing those two systems, about a 7.5 bushel per acre yield response in 2019.
What about, I know a lot of guys when we started doing strip till, primarily, you put your P and K down in the fall, but you started moving some of that to the spring. Are you seeing a yield, response if you split and move some of that fertilizer to the spring?
Yep. Yeah. So again, common question from growers, from a logistics perspective, it'd be nice to put all the fertilizer in the strip tiller, get your strip tilling done in the fall and come back with a bare planter in the springtime. But growers are still asking, hey, is there still yield response for having some fertility on the planter? So we did split up our fall applications. We had one treatment where everything was put down in the fall and we just came back with with a little bit of nitrogen on the planter in the springtime, compared to where we put half of it down in the fall in the strip. The other half was put on the planter in the springtime in a 2x2 band. So comparing those systems, we did see a little bit of a bump for the starter fertilizer on the planter in the spring. When we ran the stats, it wasn't significant. On average, it was about a 3 bushel per acre yield response between those two.
Now, overall, how does strip till compare to that full wide tillage?
Yeah, so we didn't have the perfect treatments where we had the same fertility between the two. So we don't have a good apples to apples comparison. But generally speaking, our yield levels in the strip till system were pretty comparable to what we had in the full width tiller system.
Yeah. So overall, given that, some takeaways from year one of your research. I mean, obviously, it sounds like you've got the flexibility to go fall, spring, but there's logistics. No one really knows sometimes what the spring weather is going to be like. What are some takeaways for growers?
Yeah, so I guess based on this research, again, on soils where we could get on the springtime and make strips without too much issue, it seemed like there was maybe a little bit of an edge for a spring strip and fertility program compared to the fall. I know it's not all about just purely bushels. Obviously fall strips are nice from a logistical perspective, labor, getting fertilizer tendered to you, and that sort of thing. And to be fair, in our trial, we're doing lower rates than what a grower might do. So perhaps in a grower scenario where he's putting more fertility down in the spring, maybe they wouldn't see that same difference that we saw. But of course, this is just 1 year results, and this is a 3-year project, so we've still got a couple more years to go to get a bit more definitive answer on these questions.
Yeah. Well, hey, Ben, great stuff. I want to tell growers that if they want to get some of the real details here, check out your article on Field Crop News. Lots of details there. And as I say, we'll catch up with you in the field sometime soon and get a look at year 2 of strip till trials. How about that?
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.